For the third commentary in the Ascent DVD production, we're sitting with 5 members of the film review team, and all of these folks are effectively the final end users of the Ascent films, where they review these films for engineering purposes to monitor the health and safety of the vehicle. And so to introduce you, we have Armando Uliu, who is a former lead of the ICE debris team in the image analysis lab here at Kennedy Space Center. We've got Bob Page, who manages the imagery planning and integration, basically the interface between the folks who do the tracking and review of the films. Then we have Sarah Cox and Joy Huff, who are engineers responsible for the thermal protection system on the orbiter. And finally, Scott Lockwood, who at the conclusion of the program was the NASA Imagery Analysis Facility Manager. So I'd like to thank all of you for being here today. It's a great pleasure to be in the presence of all of you, and I'm looking forward to hearing what you're going to have to say as we go through the production. One of the first things I wanted to talk about was, why are we here? Why the image analysis team exists to begin with. Armando, you are sort of coming from the actual analysis group where you're in there looking at it and managing the folks who are looking at the film. And Bob, you're more connected back to the acquisition and deployment of it, as well as interfacing directly with the team. Is that a correct statement?
That's true.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, from an analysis perspective, of course, the purpose of the imagery is to see or to capture that the vehicle and all the systems have worked properly from an external perspective. Obviously, the vehicle has internal ways of knowing itself how it worked, but all the external interfaces, whether it's T0 disconnects, Ascent debris that may come off the vehicle and strike the vehicle, all that has to be captured and reviewed to see whether the performance of the vehicle was to all the requirements that are in the books. So that's the purpose of image analysis.
And from an imagery planning standpoint, you take imagery as an instrument that can see things that are close calls, if you will. From a requirement standpoint, look at anything that was within a foot of the vehicle is counted as an impact. So you want to see the things that are happening around the vehicle, and you need multiple views in order to do photogrammetry. Because it's a highly dynamic environment around the vehicle, you always have the risk of a camera breaking, not working, etc. So you want to have multiple views to cover for that too. And so it's a huge endeavor to go out there and understand the technology, understand what optics are capable of, understand what the devices are available to you, and then fulfill the needs of the analysis community with that.
This picture we have on screen, E19. Eventually, every system, every element is seen in this picture. Ground support equipment, orbiter, main engines, boosters, and external tank. Because eventually when it rises, you'll see the bottom of the external tank. So in one shot, you're getting every bit of the program in it.
I love this because you see the engines coming on one at a time. And
I love it too when the sparkler starter with HBOIs, hydrogen burn-off igniters. I always think of fireflies. No, I love watching engines start
they
up.
are magical.
I can sit here and watch them forever.
and in fact, from a film review standpoint, I guess we've got a failure on the left HBOY, right?
There is a failure of the H-buoy on the opposite side of the screen, the lower left-hand corner of the screen. It shoots out flame instead of sparkles at one point in it, and that's a failure of it, and that would have been reported.
So that is not a hydrogen being burned off when that happens. That's actually an anomaly.
That's actually an anomaly.
Yeah, something to do with that little, it's in essence a little SRB, right? Blowing out particles.
Yeah.
So it may have had just gas pocket or something.
Right.
Yeah, because you look at it and you get the number 3 engine or the
There
number
you
1,
go. See it?
and
See it?
I just
You can see it
yeah,
now.
absolutely, yeah.
And now you're seeing hydrogen being burned off, or impurities in hydrogen being burned off.
Coming up right about now, there was a piece of tile on engine 2, which is from this view, the back engine on one of the tiles that go around
So the
engine.
rightmost engine here is engine 2, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm. There was a tile that goes around the engines on what we call the dome heat shield, broke off, and it is visible when we get to a certain point. You see a pretty good sized chunk, 4 by 3 corner of a tile, which we've seen before. It's not that unusual.
Yeah.
Because it's just a very harsh environment back there. And these tiles do get beat up over the years because it is so extreme. Once we got the on-orbit imagery, then we knew we could see it and we knew where it came from. At this point, all we saw was something kind of black fall.
Oh.
We assumed it's always a piece of tile. You never can really tell in these because there it is.
There it
There's
is.
a big black piece. You
Right
see
in
it
front of
falling
the
right in
booster.
front of them.
Yeah. So that was a
No.
piece of tile coming off the
That's what we assume.
Yeah.
I mean, it's always hard to say 100%.
right. But then you traced it back on on-orbit inspection to something that was missing from up there, and
Yeah.
made the connection circumstantially. That
Yeah, in out-orbit inspection, we usually don't get very good images of the base heat shield because the lighting, and that's not ever usually our concern, which is this area here that you see all around the engines. You really only need all this thermal protection system for Ascent because it gets
Just 'cause
the
the
hot
radiant-
from the
yeah,
engines.
the radiant plume.
So once you get on orbit, we don't really need it for descent.
a lot of debris. I mean, if you really observe these films,
Yeah, a lot of
you
frost,
just
big
see,
frost chunk.
Yeah.
Now, as we lift, you'll see, this is what I was getting at. All the elements are here. You can see orbiter, engines, GSC, SRBs, and now even the bottom of the external tank.
You saw
So
the
everything in one view.
the TSM door when it came closed. There actually some rebound on it. That would have been a reportable because that's then a access for those hot gases to get into the TSM.
See some ice falling off the umbilical, trailing down by the SRB. Image analysis, unfortunately, doesn't get attention outside of the image analysis community unless there's something major happening. Certainly the extreme would be a Columbia accident or a
Right.
Challenger accident.
Right.
But there are a lot of things that happen in image analysis that there are reactions to, whether they're a small piece of debris that comes within a foot of the vehicle, whether it's we noticed in the image analysis that ice is formed in a certain location. Why did it form there? Did we have a gas leak of some sort or a liquid leak? So there's a lot of little things that happen in image analysis that really the vast majority of the folks in the program probably don't realize is happening.
The next 4 or 5 clips here are predominantly
Hold
movies
down.
showing the hold down posts. It's a little known fact that the whole vehicle, boosters, tank, and orbiter, are all sitting on 8 of these posts right there.
The hold down post is a huge bolt. It weighs about 100 pounds. It's torqued to 1,000,000 pounds, and the nut on it has 2 pyros in it, and when they fire, the nut separates, and it's actually the tension in the bolt is what drives it down out of the hole.
The big piece that's in the foreground of the picture where the SRB it came up from, they call that a shoe, and they'd like to keep it level, but every now and again it would rock one way or the other, and so that's just one tidbit I've learned in doing film review, what shoe rock was.
Yeah, I'd never heard of that either.
Yeah, you can see
Oh,
it.
yeah,
It just rocked, yeah.
So
And I'm not expert enough or know why they cared one way or the other, but it does do that. Not every time, but sometimes, and people catch that and note that.
One of the neat things that people don't realize, and you don't capture too much on these views, the whole vehicle at liftoff really moves north.
Walks
There's a north component to it. It's not going straight up.
oh right, because
Because
the
of the
SSVs are
SSV.
canted. Yeah,
So that's a neat thing to see that a lot of people don't realize is happening, but you capture it a lot on this view on the left. You'll see the booster starts at one point, but by the time it clears, it's moving to the left on the left picture. And it's the whole reason why those covers are there. The plume is impinging on top of that hold down post. And then for reusability, that's what those covers are for. The ones on the south side of the vehicle don't have it.
Those covers used to just be some heavy metal without that other red coating on them, and that red coating on them is just an RTV, room temperature vulcanizing adhesive with some other stuff mixed into it to act as an ablator to help save the cover from the exhaust.
I just learned that those covers weigh 900 pounds.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's a half a ton.
See the little pushback?
Right. Okay, it's
And now
pushing
as soon
back.
as it
yeah.
clears, it'll start to close. Of course, it's spring activated also, but it weighs several hundred pounds.
Wow. Every day's a school day. You learn something every day.
Every day.
Yeah. It's hard to even imagine the environment in that flame trench. I mean, it's just exhaust and chaos going everywhere.
On this view, I forget the mission, but remember, and it all had to do with the time of day and the lighting, but at liftoff or at engine ignition, I can't remember,
Yes.
the OMS pod looked like it was oil canning.
It was right in that area where you see the little black tiles on the Holmes pod.
Oh, yeah.
It was right in that
Yeah.
area.
It literally looked like it was vibrating, and folks thought it was literally the structure was oil canning. Of course, there's tiles on there, so it can't be physically doing what we looks like it's doing, because tiles would be popping off left and
Yeah,
right.
they're brittle as...
But I mean, literally, it looked like the thing was just bouncing back and forth, like it was about to fall off the vehicle. and it all had to do with optics. It was right at the engine ignition.
Yeah, and it has to do with pressure waves from engine ignition and light.
Oh, so you had air pressure density changes.
Air pressure density,
Right.
and then the time of day was like at 2 o'clock, so there was the sunlight angle was coming by,
Yeah,
and I'm
yeah.
sure that pressure waves were hitting it right, and it caused havoc because people were thinking we had structural failure of an Ohms pod almost,
Yeah.
and it was really amazing. These views, what I think is cool about this umbilical is it's designed to release when it's supposed to and not release when it's not supposed to. Because during engine startup and engine thrust buildup, the whole vehicle is twanging, it's
Yeah, you got a
tilting
2
over.
foot surge.
So
right?
that interface is moving quite a bit. If you looked at that image on the right during engine startup, you'll see that whole T0 move up and then back down and then finally release.
Nice shot of the tiles on the bottom of your vehicle here. I'm assuming that the darkest tiles are the new ones that have been replaced, and the more lighter gray ones are the ones been around for a while.
Yeah, but actually with the RCC, it's the opposite. The darker ones are the ones that have flown more, and that light gray one you see, that was a new panel.
Either brand new or a few flights old.
I like the steam plume.
The nightmare I have in planning a lot of this imagery and the layout of the cameras is you never know from launch to launch what the wind directions will be, and so where is all that smoke and plume and steam going to go, and how does it obscure the vehicle? That doesn't do the analysis team any good if you can't see the vehicle. So all of that enters into multiple cameras, so that if I couldn't catch it on one side because of the wind direction, I catch it on the other side.
To me, one of the gee whiz things about this shot is at SRB ignition, of course, you have this ignition over pressurization where the shock wave it hits the bottom of the flame trench and bounces back up. So at SRB ignition, the first thing you see that looks like smoke from the flame trench is really a whole lot of water that's being pushed up from those water bags and then eventually gets sucked back down.
And that's the purpose of those water
And
bags,
that's the
is to
purpose of the
stop that
ignition
sound.
Right
So
there.
this is all water vapor.
That's water. There's
water.
some smoke, but there's water and vapor.
You see all this stuff
And
come
then-
flying up?
And there's debris, foam, and now see how it gets sucked back down?
And you can see the rainbirds are just starting now.
Yeah, you just
So
see
all
the
that
water.
water
being
was
water,
from the water
yeah.
baggies earlier.
Yep.
So yeah, all that is those orange water bags that are lining the flame trench, or the exhaust hole, left and right exhaust hole.
And that's
So it's kind of neat. You see it go up and then come back down. Of course, you see pieces of debris come flying out. The SRBs have a throat plug, basically stuffed inside them. It's a
like a
six
red-
inch. It's
foam.
just foam. It's got a
Oh.
red RTV on the outside just to plug it in. So at ignition, that thing is getting obliterated. Some of it bounces off the pad, the flame trench, and bounces back up through those exhaust holes. And that's some of those pieces that you see sometimes. Not on this particular mission, so you don't see it here, although you see a lot of debris. But we've had stuff ejected out of this SRB exhaust hole that of substantial mass before. A bolt came
Oh,
flying
really?
away, and it is being ejected out at a pretty good clip.
Coming back up.
Yes.
Coming back up toward the orbiter in one
So
case.
ricocheting off the ground and then.
Whether it ricocheted off the ground or it was trapped inside a gap of the MLP deck or something to that effect, we never really knew where it came from. We just knew that in one mission, and I recall STS-105 because I was in the middle of that investigation, here's this bolt, and you could clearly see a bolt head and threads flying out of the exhaust hole.
We've seen welding rods pop
Right.
up out of those little cracks in the MLP deck, where guys would be out there doing work, and the welding rod would roll away from them and drop down in that crack. And during launch, it gets lifted up out and blows around, and a welding rod is just a spear.
Yeah.
And that's all part of what we're doing with this film review. We're not just looking at whether the vehicle, whether these hold-down post covers work correctly, whether any debris coming off the debris containment system, that canister or the nut, but you're looking to see whether or not you have a bolt flying out of there, which isn't supposed to be flying out of there. So
Yeah.
did we miss a bolt? Did we miss the inspections on these, welding rods? And should we increase inspections and stuff? So
The environment out there is not intuitive. You can easily take something that lays in the crack of the MLP and now give it reverse energy, which is totally counterintuitive. you know?
Absolutely. You,
And-
you
and-
can't imagine how much vibration and acoustic energy is just happening every time you light engines and SRBs. So,
And if you go back before that, where you have starting at the previous launch and all of the activity that goes on an MLP to rebuild it and build it back up, and then the stacking of the vehicle and the work out at the pad, and
Right.
how many people go out there and how many little cracks and crevices and hiding places there are for debris. It's all potential problems for the next launch, and so we're constantly after FOD and doing walk downs and doing inspections and looking in all those cracks and crevices the best we can. And there's just so many of them, things get missed.
There is quite a few walkdowns that are done from mission to mission, and even with that quantity of walkdowns, as Armando was just saying, there are areas where items can easily disappear on you and you don't see it during the walkdowns. But during the film review, as mentioned, you'd be surprised. Every once in a while you'll identify something that simply came from an area that was not able to be identified before the mission started.
a lot of the guys that do film review are system guys that work SRBs or external tank or facilities. And then you do pre-launch walkdowns of the vehicle and pre-launch walkdowns of the pad and all that. Folks can see a bolt flying out of the hole and say, well, how did you guys miss that bolt? Well, we didn't miss it. The team didn't miss it because it wasn't in any obvious spot.
Yeah.
But that's why you need to learn that all these not obvious spots need to be clean also, because
Right.
it wasn't just sitting there and somebody missed his bolt. It was in a crevice somewhere where nobody thought this would ever come out.
Right.
And it may not have been since the last launch that it came out. It may have been rattled and moved around for 3 years. And so every little work that's done at the pad on the mobile launch platform, anything from a standpoint of debris, you have to be careful because eventually, sooner or later, that piece of debris is going to come flying out of wherever it's located.
And that item could originate in the VAB when the
Right.
when the vehicle was being stacked or whatever.
Or
It
out
just
the
happened to
MLP.
be transported out. Exactly.
The MLP maintenance area.
Yep. One of the things I want to cover is the relationship with the ice debris team. And the final inspection team is really the ice debris team, right? Although
Correct.
they do much more than that.
Yeah, the ice debris team is just a big name for the entire team and process. So,
Right.
so the ice debris team includes a vast variety of backgrounds, whether it's program integration, whether it's facility folks, whether it's external tank, SRB engineers, orbiter, and TPS engineering
Right.
and all that. And that team includes pre-launch walkdowns, T-minus 8-hour countdown walkdown, final inspection team, the control room guys that man the ice frost console,
Right.
and then the image analysis team, post-launch inspections of the pad, landing team, landing
support.
inspections, and then so
Yeah,
it's
so-
a big picture of the ice
Yeah,
debris
yeah.
team.
The final inspection team, because of safety reasons, you have a limited number of people that can go out when the vehicle is fueled and you're in stable replenish. So the final inspection team is a small piece of the whole ice debris team. They're the eyes and ears for all of us when they go out to the pad.
What is it, 10 members?
6 or 7.
Okay. Yeah.
It used to be up
Six
to
in a
8.
safety.
Yeah.
So now it's 6 engineers and a safety. It's gone down to as low as 6, 5 engineers and a safety, and then post Columbia we decided, hey, let's agree on 7, so we can have another set of engineering eyes on the vehicle and inspecting it.
We, as the Orbiter TPS group, we do a walk down the night before launch. After the rotating service structure is back, we do a final debris walk down where we just do the MLP surface, the pad surface, and the flame trenches. We're the only group that actually walk most of the flame trench and the pad surfaces down, looking for debris. It's called a debris walk down. The ice debris team is more involved everything from the MLP up,
Right.
and they do the whole fixed service structure and the rotating service structure.
So how many of you guys are involved with that on a typical walk down?
Well, from NASA TPS, probably just one or two of us will go on one walk down, but then we've got maybe a couple of USA engineers, a couple quality, a couple techs. So we probably have about a dozen people that go.
We were getting into the image of the plume with a lot of stuff in it. I mean, we try to pick up everything, but PAD's been around a long time, and it's going through a lot of, harsh conditions with launches, and it's just disintegrating in our hands.
Yeah. It goes all the way back to the Apollo days,
yeah.
Yeah.
So we've been picking up a lot of pad surface debris, and we always said we keep doing these walk downs long enough, I will have the whole pad surface in my bag.
Yeah. Yeah.
From picking up, concrete pieces and rust pieces
Yeah,
and
yeah.
flame trench. And it's interesting going in the flame trench, especially the south side. That's the side with the slope. It's about a 45-degree slope maybe, and it's pretty steep, but it's fun to walk down in there, and then more fun to try to get back out again.
Imagery analysis isn't entirely about the vehicle's performance. It's also about the facility and any anomaly or off-nominal events associated with that.
That kind of reminds me, because some of the MLP cameras, by the time the booster clears, it's just a big orange wash and not much going on. But watching it to the end is important because you can capture things that you may not capture if you're just waiting till there's no more view.
Right.
Like early on, a comm box that came flying away. Sure, it was several seconds after liftoff, but the box shouldn't have been flying around.
Or the object that comes flying right straight at you and right through the quartz lens.
That's the important thing about looking at it all the way to the end.
Yeah.
The guys always wondered why we're watching this when it's all water and plume and nothing else. Well, you don't know what else is there.
This is one of the shots that we have always wished we had a tower on the other side of the vehicle also so that we could match this, because you get a good overall view of the vehicle after it's been down in the mud, if you will, in the high dynamic area and things flying around it and whatever. So here now it's passing by, it's pretty much clear of any of that kind of stuff, and so you get a good overall view of the vehicle and what its health is. And it would be really nice to have the same view on the other side.
Yeah, it is
Yeah,
amazing.
it's a great shot of the orbiter. ETNSRB,
But all of the, you get a good shot of the forward surfaces, the forward areas to make sure that nothing has fallen down and hit it. And it's just a wonderful overall last view of the vehicle. Because once you get past this, the long-range trackers just never can see the forward edges of things anymore.
As the umbilicals come by, you can see some of the ice frost on the umbilicals coming off, and they're actually moving upward a little bit, obviously, as the
They get a
momentum
little,
of the vehicle.
Forward
Momentum.
motion.
Yep. Frost on the engines, bells clearly seen.
All three of you guys have been on final inspection out on the pad, which has got to be, just to go into the cool aspect of it for a minute, it's got to be pretty sweet to be part of that team.
From my perspective, yeah, it absolutely is a cool part of the job. Now,
Yeah.
It's the
now grant
ultimate.
you, when you're doing a job, I, for one, never, ever thought of it. I never realized how cool it was when you're doing it,
Yeah.
because you only have 2 hours max, 2.5 hours at the pad, and doing a full walk down the vehicle in 2.5 hours may seem like a lot of time, but it sure as heck isn't.
Well, and you got people in your ear asking questions, and you're checking boxes, and
Yeah, it is not a whole lot of time to sit there and go, wow, this is a pretty cool view.
Yeah, yeah.
You just don't have that luxury.
Yeah.
You have the luxury afterwards of saying it's pretty neat that I was out there, but
Yeah.
when you're out there, you just don't have that luxury. At least I don't remember ever having it.
well,
And the other side of it is the risk factor in being out there. You go through the training of escape from the pad and what would you do and all those kind of things. But when you really think about it, you're standing arm's length away from 500,000 gallons of liquid hydrogen, liquid oxygen. If something goes wrong, there's not much chance that you're really going to go
there's
anywhere.
extraordinary hazard associated with it, right?
Right.
You've got a fully fueled tank ready to go, and
And the hypergalls that are on board the vehicle
Yeah.
and the
Yeah, tanks are pressurized. It's ready to go. Other than systems that are electrically safed, like the pyrotechnics and the range safety system, the vehicle's ready to fly. It pressurized tanks on the orbiter, hypergolics, obviously systems purged with nitrogen, which is inert gas, liquid hydrogen, liquid oxygen. It is an alive vehicle and ready to go.
While you're out there, you have the potential for bad weather to roll in, which was one of the cases on walk down where we were forced to take shelter around the fixed service structure and wait it out for, it had to be
Lightning.
at least an hour or
you had
so.
lightning
Yeah,
warning.
we had lightning warnings.
That's not where you want to be.
No.
no.
About 20 feet from a fully fueled external tank when you got a lightning alert going on.
And understand, it's not just the external tank, but all of the piping and everything that carries all of
Sure.
that hydrogen to, through the orbiter into the tank. And, we've had leaks of those. We've had ruptures of those lines, and, and that's a huge potentially explosive.
yeah, the fuel farms are massive out there. Yeah,
It's a quarter mile away.
yeah.
Yeah. But right on the side of the MLP, we had one of the the hydrogen vent line rupture one time. A joint in it broke, and if these guys had been out there at the pad, it could have been
hydrogen flowing all over the place with us out there.
Wow.
So,
Wow.
I mean, with all that said, again, from my perspective, I never really sat and looked at the gee whiz of it, and I never really was out there. I had never been out there thinking of the danger of it. I mean, I was aware that there was obviously a risk being out there and a hazard, but I wasn't worried about it.
You have a job
and
to
scared
do.
about it.
Right.
You have a job to do.
You have a job to do, and you
Yeah.
have limited time to do it, and everyone is depending on you to get the job done and do it right, and be able to report the good things and the bad things. The crew is expecting that from you. The crew's families are expecting all of that from you to make sure that you can say that vehicle is safe. And so you have a job to do. And
Yeah.
Armando's right. You don't think about those dangers, and you don't think about the gee whiz factor of it. You don't think about those things until afterwards.
Yes, that's America's last wooden pole on the right there.
Yeah.
With my last walk down being the final mission of Endeavor, I went into knowing this is the last walk down that I'll ever perform out there, and that's the last mission of Endeavor. So I went into it with the cool factor in the back of my mind. But as these guys said, you're under a constrained amount of time, and I was so focused on getting the particular shots that I wanted to get with the telescope that we had set up. And being that it originally was to be a daylight mission that had gone into nighttime, it added that much more stress upon me that I didn't realize until afterwards that I never actually took a moment to reflect upon that this is Endeavor's last launch while I was out there. I was just so pushing, trying to get the best shots that I could for everybody that was to be looking at those photos during and after we got back from the pad area.
That brings up a point that I hadn't thought about. It's a completely different animal doing final inspection in darkness as opposed to light, right? I mean,
Oh, absolutely.
even though you've got all those xenon lights aimed at the vehicle, it's still different at night than it
no
is
doubt
in daylight.
about it.
Yeah.
No doubt. If you're taking pictures, you have to realize that you'll be taking shots of, at one point, super bright area, and you might be taking a shot of an area that's in shadow and darkness, and you got to be careful with that. When you're looking at it, you got to do the same thing.
Right.
It's a whole different beast out there.
Now, this next clip coming up in just a few moments is going to be one for the review team. There was a fair amount of black debris coming out of both the front and the back end of the flame trench at SRB ignition, and I certainly wasn't able to identify it when I first looked at the clip. So, Scott, I know you were very familiar with STS-124. Why don't you give us a few words and explain what we're going to see here?
STS-124 had its unique issues associated with during launch. Basically, the flame trench area on Pad A liberated quite a few bricks as well as fondue fire, and there's some examples there coming out on the south end. You saw some, but more so to the north end, you see a lot of bricks. As Bob mentioned earlier, there was a lot of with the aid of imagery analysis and our IR assets, we were able to see quite a bit of the bricks shooting off to the north.
Yeah.
There you see it coming up, two dark ones
Yeah.
coming over to the left side, coming out of the SSME.
And then a whole bunch.
Oh yeah, there's a whole
I
bunch
start
in there.
seeing multiple ones off to the right, going north
Easily
off the SRB
3 or 4
side.
that I can tell right away.
All that stuff circulating around in the back is water bag material, right? There seem to be a bunch
There's
of...
some of that too, but some of it is throat plug, some of it is fire brick. The throat plug probably gets up higher because it's lighter.
Yeah, I don't think there was much evidence that said that any of the fire brick got much above the deck level of the MLP. It all
Exactly.
stayed low. It may have been,
Up.
it may have been, enough trajectory to get over the fence and into the pond out there, but it wasn't, it wasn't straight up in the air because the MLP blocked anything from being able to go straight up.
No doubt, 124, and I don't know if it was the next one or what, we had a significant number of bricks coming out, but we've had single bricks in the past come out and go right through the fence. I mean, post-launch you'd see a hole in the fence or a dent in the fence. Literally the chain link fence would be like I have a big dimple in it. It is from a pretty substantial impact in it.
Yeah.
After this particular mission, and because of the brick liberation, what Armando and Bob were saying earlier is an area we decided to go with a couple of the camera views where we actually lowered the camera view so we could see some of the activity taking place under the MLP deck surface.
On the 195-foot level where the crew access arm is, the final inspection team stops there and this vent line that's routing hydrogen gas from the external tank out to the flare stack. That line is covered in frost, so on some launch days when the final inspection team is out there on a hot day, on the 195-foot level, you can get access to this vent line, and some of the guys, if not all the guys, are scraping some frost off the line and putting it in the back of their suits just to try to cool off a little bit. It's just a perfect spot to do it.
Yeah, because it's so hot up there. You're looking for relief, right?
Absolutely.
That's a fantastic story.
Again, the final inspection team gets sent out at T-minus 3 hours once we're in stable replenish. At the same time, the closeout crew is sent out to begin the work to get ready for the astronaut crew. So the closeout crew, the guys in the white suits that are in
All the guys
in
that
the
did
white
the
room,
signs,
the
right?
guys that did the sign,
Yeah.
they get sent out there also. So when we're out there, and when the team's out there, these guys are up on a 195-foot level on the orbiter access arm and in the ship, getting the vehicle ready. When the final inspection team, at least I did it, and I'm sure Tom did it too, when the final inspection team got to the 195-foot level, we walk out on the arm, and I would always go into the white room and say my hellos to the team and to the lead of the closeout crew, and just to let them know that we're there and we're about to head down below you guys, so you don't need to worry about us getting in the basket. So it's kind of one of the unofficial, sign-offs between one
Right.
team and the other.
Yeah, it's like a handshake,
like
yeah.
a handshake. And then the beauty of that is they always had cold water in there. I don't know if these guys ever knew that. So if you just had a good rapport with them, hey, could I have a cup of cold water? I'd stop in there and have a drink of cold water.
No, Armando never seemed to pass that bit of information on during the last 5-6 years of the final inspection team.
Well, it's one of the benefits of being the lead.
Well, we'll have to check in with Tom as to whether Armando passed that from one lead to the next.
I hope I didn't
right?
forget that.
I think it might have stayed with the leads, if
Yeah.
so. Oh, that is a good story.
So this is the first of one of our remote tracking cameras in Ascent. As you see, we're going to fly through this exhaust burn-off plume, if you will. This is coming from one of the fuel farms, right?
This is coming from the flare stack that's burning the residual hydrogen that's being vented off the external tank while it was still on the ground. That residual hydrogen, the flare stack burning, you could actually feel the heat from that on the final inspection team on the MLP deck if the winds are just right. That's how intense hydrogen is burning.
It's about halfway to the camera site, so about an eighth of a mile.
Eighth of a mile.
Yeah,
Okay.
right. It's no short distance. It's
It's
out
no
there.
short
Yeah.
distance. So yeah, it was pretty incredible where the winds are right and you can feel that heat.
Guys, I'd like to touch a little bit on the history of film review. Bob and Armando, you two became involved with final inspection and film analysis around the time of Challenger. And I'd like to have you guys give me an idea of what it was like back in those days technically to go through the process of film review and how it's evolved over the last couple of decades into what it is now.
For me, from hiring on right after Challenger, there was a big change in film review, analysis, and acquisition post-Challenger, because they did a lot of changes from post-Challenger. They used to do the review in a conference room on a pull-down screen that was in
Right.
terrible shape, and it wasn't a good atmosphere for 20 guys to sit in. So they basically put a lot of money into, okay, let's revamp the whole analysis system. Some new cameras were bought, better projection and capability
These
for
are
the analysis.
film days now. There's no digital at
there's
this
no-
point.
No, there's nothing digital in
Yeah.
these days. The only thing on
Analog
these trackers
videos.
were analog videos.
Yeah.
They back up the film, not really. At
Yeah.
29.97 frames per second, wasn't interlaced, wasn't anything like
Yeah.
a backup to
Yeah,
film.
yeah.
But the film analysis part of it had a brand new lab in the VAB here at Kennedy, and it was as state of the art as it got in the late 80s. 1988 timeframe, 87, 88 is when it was completed.
Still clunky compared to today.
Oh,
Yeah, right.
absolutely.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, I
Absolutely. If you look back at some of the equipment, you just shake your head as to, oh my God, you were doing this, with this piece of equipment. The 35 millimeter projector, for instance, that we had was a projector built by a gentleman in California that worked in the movie studios, and we asked him for an analysis projector, so it included stop frame capability with bigger fan. He basically built it in his garage, in his home shop. It's a custom built 35 millimeter analysis
And that
projector.
unit is still up there, right? In the review room?
We moved it to another area, but we still have it. But over the years, it was starting to give us problems
Right,
after
right.
15, 17 years. That projector was very sensitive. The control panel, if you didn't pause between the touching the keys, the thing would just freeze up on you. Then you had to power it down,
Oh,
wait
yeah,
a few
yeah,
minutes,
yeah.
power it back up, and cross your fingers. I mean, it was that sensitive after years of operation.
And then-
we'd have guys go out there and periodically and clean the unit off. And, they were so careful because they knew very well that
Right.
this is a one-off, and to get it replaced was going to be a significant amount of money.
Once you saw something and you identified it, then you had to mark the frames. And if you wanted to get motion things, then you had to go scan by hand on a flat panel scanner multiple frames to put together into a video. And and it was very clunky and very cumbersome, and it took days to get through all of the work you needed to do analysis.
Right.
Which for instance, on the Columbia, when we saw the debris come off and strike the orbiter, we pulled that film off the projector and started scanning it. The 17 or 18 frames that this event was covering. And it took us, grant you, that's all we did, part of the team, while the rest of the team did more of the imagery. In the back rooms, these guys were scanning these images and putting it together into a clip so we can send it out. And that took several hours, which, nowadays, scanning 17 frames on a 35 millimeter film won't take you more than a minute, probably.
Right, yeah, it's going through these.
So it was tedious, which is part of what we learned. We needed to have something better. But prior to Columbia, we're really more of scan it so we can send it out to show folks what it is that we're seeing. 'Cause
Right.
we weren't doing that sophisticated of an analysis. Certainly when Columbia happened, everybody realized we have to have this capability. So that's when post-Columbia we had an influx of money.
They're overlooking one aspect that we had to endure bringing back the older days, and that is we were lucky we could even hear each other think, much less talk, because you had 16 millimeter projectors that are running like Gatling guns.
Very true.
And because there's so
And
many
then-
of them, we would split them up, and
Oh,
you'd actually have
so
two
loud.
running at the same time.
Really? So you had
In
two
that lab.
Two screens.
Yeah.
We'd
in
have
the
the
same
room
room.
split.
Oh.
We'd have two 16
No
millimeter
divider or
projectors
nothing.
running at the same
screen.
time. And so here we are, 6 or 7 of us watching one film. Of course, if you were in the middle, you kind of did both, but you'd have comments going for this film while people are making comments of this film, 2 different films going at the same time.
And
Projectors ratcheting away.
that was the normal way of operating. So
Absolutely.
it seemed natural.
I
right?
don't know if normal was the right word, but that was the way the operation took
it was
place.
normal. It was
normal,
normal. You were
yeah.
just spoiled.
Luckily, when I came along, we advanced and evolved to where, through the digital
Nice,
world, we were
nice.
able to do things in a much more efficient way, I believe Mr. Page just said, and in a definite quicker and
All
more
right, we'll leave it
efficient
at
manner.
that. We'll leave it at that.
Here is yet another great tracking film. Imagine tracking this thing in real time and making it look like it's absolutely still in the viewfinder. This really highlights the skill of these guys. There's extraordinary pressure on them not to have this thing fall out of frame.
We've been in film review before where we're sitting there and they'll lose it and it's like, you hear just the whole room goes, it's like, come on, get it back. And it's amazing if they lose it that some of them can get it back.
Yeah.
That's even more amazing.
Yeah.
It's amazing enough if they keep it, but then if something happens and they do lose it, if they can get it back after not seeing it and trying to, get it on their little monitor, I think that's even more incredible.
Yeah.
Now this was a case on 124, is if you look at the forward area, the reaction control system, is a piece of Tyvek actually did tear, and a piece is still left there on one of the big oval thrusters. You can see that bright white. That is Tyvek. The cover tore and left that piece. And so that would have been considered a failure or an off nominal item, and it does eventually come off, but it's well past the time it was supposed to. And so something coming off that late could have, caused some small damage somewhere.
Yeah, see, it's flicking there a little bit.
Yeah, it's becoming more loose, and it'll eventually, and there it went. Which we don't see if it did hit anything, but, those are the kind of things that then could come back to the ohms pod, leading edge of the ohms pod, because now it's going much, faster than when they originally were supposed to come off, and it could have caused just some very small, minor damage on the ohms pod.
Interesting thing, during film review, we had many discussions about having checklists. Should we have a checklist during film analysis? And it always came down to no, because the checklist focused you to look for certain things, which distracted you from missing something that might be new or it might be different than was ever before. And so it takes a while to get used to being able to look at the whole picture and being able to see the whole scene and then what's wrong in the whole scene as opposed to focusing in on certain areas. Now there are times when there's so many things going on and that we've actually said, okay, this portion, this group over here, you look at this quadrant, this group over here, you look at that quadrant, and try to divide it up. But most of the time you just want an overall view of it and see the things that are wrong.
And this would have been the first flight of the Tyvek covers, and you'll see that a couple of them don't come off for well past their allotted time of 13 seconds. One on the right side here, the big oval one stays too long, and then when we rotate and roll, you'll see there's one on the other side still there. And I believe it ended up coming off about 21 seconds. And at that point, we're really, going pretty fast, and it could cause damage. But that was something we learned, once again, we did a new design that did pretty good. They got most of it, but they still had a few flaws with it. The two Tyveks didn't come off at the correct time.
And then the other thing we talked about earlier was running the imagery backwards.
I just want to say that.
And the fact that running it backwards gets you to see things that you may not see when running it forward because the eye is confused with the backward motion of the vehicle, which is not the normal thing that you would see, and so things that are moving opposite that then just jump out at you.
You're right. Your attention gets drawn to things that you don't normally see.
No, normally see. And the part about focusing in on certain parts of the imagery or not, it's almost by default that some folks would focus in on certain things because the team is made up of system guys. So there were external tank engineers, there's SRB engineers, there's orbiter, TPS folks and stuff. So when you first start looking at the imagery, the first time you see a film or a particular film number, the external tank guys are probably focusing in on the external tank.
Right.
And the SRB guys are focusing in on the SRBs. And so you've gotten a little bit of that already. So as you go through the film, like Bob said, you go through the film forward first, and then you're going through reverse, and somebody says, oh, I see something coming off this area of the ETSRB. Okay, well then when you start seeing it in reverse, then other people focus in on it and try to figure out what it is you're looking at. And so it's kind of it is part of a team effort of going back and forth and looking at all these different, having all these different people look at the whole image. You get a pretty good 100% coverage of the field of view you're looking at without having to tell people, go look at this particular image. I mean, it is just amazing the level of detail that the film review can do.
Well, with that, it has been a great pleasure and honor to sit and talk with you on not only the film review process, but some of the final inspection processes that go on, all in preparation for a shuttle launch. And I'd like to thank you for taking the time to sit and share your experiences and your stories with the audiences of the Ascent DVD production.
Well, thank you. It was my pleasure because I love to talk about it and to anybody, from the minor little details to the big picture. So no, I enjoyed this very much. Thank you for inviting us over.
Yeah, I think that's true for all of us. We love to talk about shuttle and the space program because it's what we love to do.
The imagery has and always will help any launch vehicle in the future. Imagery is important, and we need to continue to improve the imagery and improve the analysis capabilities of the folks. But more importantly, we need to continue to understand that we need to have assets to acquire images of the vehicles as it's ascending. It's a must. We have to have it. Whether it's film or video, certainly video is increasing in capability, so we could one day do without film, but we have to have imagery of asset of any vehicle.
We're visually oriented people, and with exploration, we need to be able to document that and capture that to be able to show to everybody. Unfortunately, at this time period, it's only a handful of men and women that get to take such a journey. And if it wasn't for that imagery capturing capability and being able to let the rest of us see that through their eyes, it would be a deficiency and a shame for the rest of us if that didn't exist. So I'm all about imagery, and I'm a sole supporter of that.
The skills that it takes to do this type of imagery, the capabilities that required, the infrastructure, the equipment, all of that stuff can never be replaced. You can't buy the quality of equipment today that took these images. The trackers and the optics and the people that operate them and the skills they have, that can't be replaced. It's something that we need to keep alive, knowing that not long down the road we're going to be back in this spot, whether it's for commercial vehicles and verifying their performance, or it's our own heavy lift vehicle, or what we're doing in the future. And all of this applies to the next destination. If we're going to the moon, then we're lifting off from the moon, and we're going to need imagery and how to handle imagery there, or Mars or an asteroid or wherever it is. We're going to need imagery there. We need to plan all of that ahead of time. And it's the way that we show the country, that we involve the country, that we involve the young people and inspire them to reach out and pursue beyond what their imagination is.